When I was younger, my mom used to make me solve these bond books, which are basically like maths question booklets, and I really hated them. Real ones know the pain of bond books. I remember we'd always argue about like how many I needed to do that day. She'd say like, do 10 of these exercises, and I said like, no, I only want to do 5. And I just remember always arguing about like how many I needed to do, but I always lost the argument anyway. And so I remember I was sitting there looking at like the 190 pages of like just rows and rows and rows of questions, and I just know I ain't doing all that. And suddenly I know what I have to do. And now I feel like a special like forces op guy as I test the floor for creaks as I'm like moving across the room to not make a sound. And I find it tucked in between Moby Dick and a dictionary, the answer booklet. But the problem is, my desk and like the bookshelf far apart, and in between them there's a doorway, and that doorway like my mom's sitting across and she could like see through it right from her room. And so I knew I had to make as little trips as possible in between the answer booklet and my desk, because I did this before, right, and I got caught and it wasn't fun. And basically, I get really good at it. I get really good at cheating. I'm able to memorize like 5 pages worth of answers at a time, which was probably around like hundreds of numbers, right? And I'm able to copy all of them in, while also deliberately getting some of those wrong, because like you know how it is. Memorization is a key skill for students, and I just said that story because I'm not like saying you guys should cheat, but that was just like one of the ways I always use memorization. I know that you've been sat in the exam hall, you have like the exam paper in front of you, and you close your eyes and you're trying to visualize like that textbook page that you were reading last night in your mind, because like you know that's where the answer is, but like that image in your mind is just blurry and you wish you had better memory, right? My mom would always like used to tell me like when I came in from reception, so when I was like 4 or 5, I'd just be like yapping about like the 16 stages of the moon because I memorized all of them. But even unconsciously until now, whether it's learning how to solve the Rubik's Cube blindfolded, memorizing 12 entire essays for like English language, or memorizing 4,000 Latin words for my GCSEs, I'd say I'm pretty good at memorizing, and you can learn how to too. I'm Steven, also known as J-Spark, and with my own experience but also methods such as from Jim Quick and Joshua Foer, the US memory champion, yes, that exists. Here's how to remember what you study and supercharge your memory. Number 1, make pathways. Yo, before we go on, I have a pretty big announcement to make. Whatever kind of student you are that you're watching right now, it's never too early to start thinking about the U word, universities. And since it's the summer anyway, it's a pretty good time to start to think about that. And if you've always kind of had like that spark, that desire to go to the top university to make yourself proud, your parents proud, then you better clear your diary for the 4th of August, 4 PM BST. Because I'm going to be bringing on an Ivy League student that goes to Princeton University and studies economics. His name is Coletto, by the way, and he's someone that I call like that student. He's co-president of Blackjack Capital, director and corporate contacts manager at Business Today, and he's raised over 170k in corporate sponsorships. And I'll be bringing him up for a free live webinar that anyone can attend, where we're going to be breaking down in specific detail how the university game is changing, what an Ivy League student actually looks like, and everything that you need to know to go into your number 1 choice university. It's free to join, and it's a great opportunity to just be on a live call with me and an Ivy League student and ask questions. And you guys can sign up with the link in the description. Anyway, back to the video. When you think, neurons inside your brain connect together, forming neural pathways, and that's what represents information inside your brain. The connection in between neurons are called synapses, and the more synapses a certain idea activates in your brain, the better you'll learn, because there's more pathways that your brain can use to retrieve that information. Strong neural pathways enhance memory. In Learn Like a Pro, Oakley and Olaf Stewie explained that when you memorize something simple, like a telephone number or something like that, the pathways are short. But when you learn something more complex, like a subject or a concept, the pathways are longer and form webs, cementing it into your long-term memory. The more you use the pathways though, the stronger the bonds become. For example, when you like walk through that field to like get a shortcut to school, like it's just like there's no path, right? You just have to like walk through like the big long weeds. But the more you like walk through that, and the more like people walk through that area, that starts to become a path, right? That's how paths are formed. The exact same in your mind. The more you use that path, the more it actually gets cemented into an actual pathway for your mind to use. And so that's why it gets easier to use and not to forget. When you practice, it becomes easier, and when you review, you don't forget. And so when you memorize, you need to intertwine it in associative webs. Joshua Foer, the US champion of memory, says that memories don't exist alone, actually in a web of associations. For example, thinking of a baker can make you think about like your favorite bread, or maybe your favorite bakery. When you think of YouTube, you probably think of like, for me it's like the logo, but you might think of like your favorite YouTuber. It might be like Mr. Beast, right? You don't memorize things like separately, because that takes up a lot of like storage, right? You memorize by forming associations with things you already know. To retrieve memories, search for pieces of info by thinking about other things that are connected in the neural web of memory. Actively engaging with and reinforcing the information you want encourages your brain to form strong neural associations that supercharge your memory. How you can actually do this leads into the second point, which is to integrate your existing knowledge. Quick believes that association is the basic form of all learning. In first to be connected with something you already know. Imagine having to learn physics without learning maths first. Like, you learn about all these formulas, but you don't know like addition, multiplication first. Actually, like physics, that's a great example because it's an example of how you actually like learning by associating it with something you already know. And the example of like white blood cells, learning white blood cells as their own is like quite a difficult concept to grasp. But the reason like it's a concept that a lot of like students find it really easy to understand is actually because we associate it with something we already know, such as like a knight in shining armor, like they protect us, right? Or like bodyguards. Since we already know what like a bodyguard does, like what a knight does, like they protect like the princess from the dragon, right? We kind of already are able to grasp that concept because we associate it with something we already know. And so you should start to do that with all the things you learn. You should start to use mnemonics and images to link things all together. When we were trying to learn like the chemistry reactivity series, if I were to just memorize it like as the elements, potassium, sodium, calcium, and magnesium, those are just like elements and you have to brute force memorize them. But if you memorize it as a mnemonic, which the one I always learned was, please stop calling me a careless zebra, instead try learning how copper saves gold. And since it's the start of those letters, I'm able to remember them. 3. Use spaced repetition and let yourself forget. This is the forgetting curve, and this shows that the more time passes, the more information naturally that you start to forget. So the key to overcoming this is to review the information right before you're about to forget it. In the book Make a Stick, Peter Brown says, spaced practice gives your brain the time it needs to strengthen new knowledge and store it in the long-term memory consolidation. So actually, your brain needs time to move something from the short-term memory to the long-term memory, which is ultimately our goal, right? So you have to let yourself forget. So an easy strategy to do this is to diversify your studies. So in a day that you study, you should mix up what you study at the same time. For example, in the morning, if you do maths, like after that, you should probably do something like English and like make your brain forget about what you did in maths. And then at the end of the day, before you stop your study session, you should review everything you learned today. That's why like reviewing stuff for 5 minutes each day using flashcards is proven to be an effective way to memorize because you're allowing yourself to forget some of it. And naturally, it's kind of like this. I don't know if you guys have like baked cookies, right? Or like anything. But you kind of have to let them cool to see if they turned out well because you have to see like where the gaps were or like what like didn't form properly. And it's the same with your memory. If you don't give your brain to process it, transfer it into your long term, after that and you retest yourself, you start to see like what made it into your long term but what didn't, what you forgot. And when you repeat this process again and again and again, you start to be able to fill in your gaps and memorize things for longer. Test yourself with active recall techniques. In tests, what do you have to do? You have to recall information. So you need to stimulate and replicate that exact same thing. What's a revision technique that you can use? You need to test yourself to recall info, past papers, right? Or Feynman technique where you explain it to someone else. It's like in the competition, right? If say you're going on like a biking competition, you're not going to be using like stabilizers. But if you just practice all the time with stabilizers, that's the same as not doing any practice at all because you're not practicing what's like actually important, what you're actually going to be doing the main thing. In the exam, you're not going to have like your notes, like that stabilizer is not going to be there. Just stop revising off those and actually like start testing yourself and doing active recall, which is like doing past papers as we just talked about. And this is all learning how to learn, right? And it's a vital skill in being able to memorize or improving yourself as a student. And if you found this useful, go to the first link in the description and check out my free masterclass about how to study, where I introduce Student Accelerator, my program that's helping students all around the world become the best student they can be without having to study for hours and hours. And if that interests you, make sure to check that out. But as always, take action on what you learned today, and I'll see you next time.